Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining today's session on bringing adaptation financing to where it matters most, a case study from the Logic project in Bangladesh. I am Jasmine Blankenagel. I'm a program officer for climate finance and adaptation at UNDP here in Bangladesh, and will be moderating today's event. So I would like to start off by giving you a brief introduction and overview of today's event. IIED research has found that less than 10% of funding committed under international climate funds to help developing countries take action on climate change is directed at the local level. However, it is increasingly acknowledged that local stakeholders are best positioned to understand the complexity of local contexts and thus are particularly apt at leading adaptation planning and budgeting. So the realization that local actors are not adequately involved in adaptation planning and financing in Bangladesh was kind of the starting point of the Logic project that we will present today. So the local government initiative on climate change project was conceptualized in 2016 as a joint initiative of the government of Bangladesh, the European Union, the government of Sweden, the United Nations Development Fund, a program, and the United Nations Capital Development Fund. And through the project, we've developed a mechanism to deliver climate finance to the most vulnerable households and local government institutions across 7 climate vulnerable districts for building resilience and promoting local action on climate change adaptation at scale. So the Logic project is a true pioneer of locally led adaptation in Bangladesh and has established an innovative, cost-effective adaptation financing mechanism that places vulnerable communities at the heart of decision-making to become local adaptation change makers. And today's session aims to reflect on the lessons learned from Logic's climate financing model and offer policy directives for local climate financing in Bangladesh and beyond. And we will start off by presenting a video highlighting our project and introducing our partners. And this will be followed by a presentation by AKM Azad Rahman from UNDP, who is our Logic project coordinator. And we will then start our panel discussion with our esteemed guests and panelists, including Mohammed Fazla Azim, Joint Secretary of the Local Government Division and National Project Director of Logic, Nayoka Martinez Backstrom, the first Secretary of Environment and Climate Change at the Embassy of Sweden to Bangladesh, Hubert Blom, Attaché and Program Manager for Green Inclusive Development at the Delegation of the European Union, and Sophie de Koning, Global Manager of the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, LOCAL, at UNCDF. And lastly, we will have a Q&A session where you can ask questions and contribute to the debate. So we look forward to a very rich and engaging session. And I'd say we'll start with our video. So let me share my screen. And please let me know if you face any difficulties, if there's any difficulties with the sound.
Geographically, Bangladesh is the downstream of Himalaya coast and the bank of Bay of Bengal. So in both the context, because of the climatic change, Bangladesh is the mostly vulnerable country in all over the world. The international saline and the cyclone, all these things become a very big issue.
যে সময় জল বাড়ির ভিতরে ঢুকে যায় বা আপনার এলাকায় ঢুকে যায় সেটা চিন্তা হয় যে আসলে কি হবে এখন দিশারা হয়ে পড়ি যে এই জিনিসপত্র কিভাবে রাখবো ছেলে মেয়েদের কোথায় নিয়ে রাখবো
আমরা সিডরে বন্যার পানি আসিয়া আমরা নদী কাছে আমাগো হ্যাঁ আসিয়া রাস্তাঘাট সব তলাইয়ে যায় বালিতে আপনার নুন পানিতে বন তামায় ঘাস তামায় থাকে না ধান তো দূরের কথা
Those who are living in the coastal area seriously affected by the climate change try to migrate to the mainland and all the cities. So in that context, our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has taken a multiple initiative so that they can survive in their own land. Local government institutions have a good connectivity to all the local people within their constituency. It is very much easy for them to involve the people for successful implementation.
The Local Government Initiative on Climate Change project, implemented with support from the government of Bangladesh, the European Union and the government of Sweden, and with technical guidance from UNDP, and UNCDF has created an effective climate financing model to help the most vulnerable communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. By building the capacity of local government institutions and climate-vulnerable communities, the project empowers them to lead effective and inclusive adaptive local development planning and budgeting processes. Through targeted training and adaptive livelihood grants, Logic supports climate-vulnerable women to implement adaptive livelihoods. Logic also provides grants to local government institutions to implement adaptive community schemes that benefit the wider communities. Through this approach, Logic is building the resilience of climate-vulnerable communities across the climate hotspots of Bangladesh.
I think it's very innovative because it really takes solutions down to the local level. We're so used to talking about climate change at the macro level and emissions target. What I really appreciate about this project is the local people who are facing the challenges of climate change, they're finding the solutions, finding how to manage the budgets that are available, so they bring the best solutions to bear, and we're very pleased that it's delivering results on the ground for ordinary people.
Through capacity building and micro grants, we are helping climate vulnerable women to get alternative livelihoods that are adaptive, that increase productivity, ensure their social protection. When I talk to Logic beneficiaries, it is clear that when you invest in women, you invest in the society as a whole. Logic has not only enabled women to adapt to climate change, but also empowered them and their families financially and socially.
কি ব্যবসা করব তা আমরা সবাই গ্রুপে বসে সিদ্ধান্ত করি। কৃষি অফিসার কাছ থেকে প্রশিক্ষণ পাওয়ার পরে আমরা তরমুজ চাষ করি। শুধু ফলনগুলো এত বেশি ভালো হয়েছিল যে আমরা সেই ফলনগুলো মাঠ থেকেই বিক্রয় করতে পেরেছি, আমাদের বাইরে কোথাও নিয়ে যাওয়া লাগেনি। সেখানে আমরা 3.5 লাখ টাকা খরচ করে তরমুজের ক্ষেতে 11.5 লক্ষ টাকা আমরা সেখান থেকে কেনা বেচা করি। এই লজিক প্রকল্প এসে সেখান থেকে আমরা বাইরে আমরা জোন দেওয়া লাগে না, নিজেদের ক্ষেতে আমরা কাজ করে সেই পয়সাটা নিজেরাই আমরা উপার্জন করি। চিকিৎসা করা, তাদের খাদ্য, কাপড় চোপড়ে সব দিক থেকে আমরা সুযোগ সুবিধা পাচ্ছি এই লজিক প্রকল্প এসে।
Logic has established an effective mechanism to challenge climate finance to local governments to implement schemes that provide adaptive benefits to the wider communities.
দৈনিক প্রায় 50,000 লিটার পানি পাচ্ছে। সেই ট্রিটমেন্ট প্ল্যান্টটা পুকুরের পানি বা রেইন ওয়াটারের পানি সেটাকে ট্রিটমেন্ট করে বিশুদ্ধ পানিতে রূপান্তর করছে। যখন মানুষ পানি নিতে আসে একটা নির্দিষ্ট পরিমাণ পানি নেওয়ার জন্য তারা কার্ড নিয়েছেন এবং মহিলারা নিজে থেকে কার্ড দিয়ে তারা পানি নিয়ে যান।
স্বল্প মূল্যে যে জলটা পাবো সেটা আমাদের জীবিকা নির্বাহ হবে এবং বিশুদ্ধ পানি পান করতে পারবো। এর থেকে কিছুটা সুবিধা তো আমরা পাচ্ছি।
Locally led approaches to adaptation leverage local communities' knowledge and creativity to develop and implement solutions that can accelerate local adaptation efforts. We're very proud to have established a successful model to deliver climate finance to the most vulnerable communities here in Bangladesh, and hope to see our model scaled up but also implemented in other contexts across the world. Let us invest in local actors and their solutions and put adaptation in the hands of our communities.
This was a short video giving a bit of an overview of the project. And now I would like to invite our project coordinator, Azad Rahman. He will be presenting a presentation that will dive a bit deeper on what Logic is doing and how we're looking forward to this work being scaled up. Azad, perhaps you can introduce yourself.
Hello and welcome to today's session, Bridging Adaptation Finance Where It Matters Most. And my name is A.K. Azad Rahman. I'm excited to be here today to share examples from Logic project with you. Over the next 10 minutes, we will explore how the local government, in collaboration with the UN agencies and with the assistance of our key development partners, the government of Sweden and the European Union, is uncovering a model to assist not only the institution closely associated with those most affected by the climate change, but the most vulnerable households themselves. The model helps them to transform their lives and build resilience against the climate shocks. Whether you you are here to learn something new or gather information or simply expand your knowledge on the adaptation financing, I'm sure that you will find this presentation valuable. So throughout the presentation, I'll encourage you to engage with me to asking and sharing your thoughts in the chat, and we would definitely be answering your questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, let's get started and explore the topic together. Jasmine, can you share the presentation?
Yes.
And also before starting, I'm just making an announcement. I'm joined from Bandarban, so if there is any interruption, Jasmine will catch up from there. So thank you. So, this bridging adaptation financing, where it matters most is a case. I would like to share the case study from the Logic project of Bangladesh, and you already got some of the information from the videos already. So, if we think about the adaptation deficit, and if you see that our efforts in the community level, you'll find that we are mostly crowding in the coping mechanism rather than the adaptation. Since the adaptation cost is remain high, and the lack of climate information and adaptive capacities are one of the key areas that we need to build on in the coming days as well, and the funding required for this adaptation solutions effectively. So the local government institution through community leadership can build the social capital needed for this effective local adaptation, supported by a robust climate financing system at the local level. Jasmine, can you go next? Okay, so if you see that how much the costs of adaptation is, can you go back? Okay, thank you. So the costs of adaptation, if you see that the government of Bangladesh is already investing, they're spending almost 3 billion a year addressing the climate change impacts. And then if you see the recent report from the Asian Development Bank, you'll find that our GDP loss is about close to 2%, and it will increase in this century. And if you see the National Adaptation Plan recently been approved by the government last year, that has outlined that we need 230 billion of resources for this adaptation. And therefore, the accelerated efforts will be required to harness the global climate funds and the collaboration efforts from the private sector investment and support from the bilateral and the multilateral development partners is necessary to minimize those gaps. And if you see that climate financing, why invest in adaptation at the local level? It's because climate change adaptation falls within the scope of the inherent responsibilities of the local authorities. And they have the legitimacy to convening power to coordinate, co-finance, and engage with the stakeholders. And local stakeholders are well positioned to understand the diversity and complexity of the local context, as we see that the change and the difference in the vulnerability is very diverse in the different regions. Even in a one upajala, you will see that the impact is not the same in different wards even. So it's the local institutions to play the most, and they are the one who are the close in contact with the communities and the local context. And also the women, persons with a disability, young people, ethnic minorities, marginalized communities can gain a greater voice through the local platforms. So the development and climate agendas can be more easily integrated at the local level if we use the local institutions for building the climate change adaptation. And the logic vision is actually, if you see that the logic has established itself as a sustainable model for strengthening the climate change adaptation actions, delivering the climate finance to the most vulnerable people and to local government in a lower transaction cost. And it really aims to increase the awareness and the capacities for adaptation response to climate change local level, and also increase the finance available to the local governments and adaptation measures. And also the adaptation is mainstreamed into the national and local government planning, which is key of this project design. And mechanisms is transparent, accountable, inclusive, and efficient. So there are two distinct climate financing models that we follow in this logic project. One is for the vulnerable households. Who are the disproportionately impacted by the climate change. So in this case, we've designed the microgrant, which is called the direct cash transfer, and we directly transfer to the climate vulnerable women in their own wealth account, and then we try to build their capacity, how they will use this money for building their resilience, and then that help them to their resilient livelihood and immediate term resilience for the climate vulnerable households. And of course, we also are working on how to build the resilience for the longer term that I will discuss later. So just take a look at one example that empowering women through the climate resilient farming. Here you see that CRF, the Climate Resilience Plant and Targeted Capacity Building, a group of 24 farmers in Bagherhat started their cultivating golden rice. And with just over 4 months, they have harvested heaps of the yield, and they got the profit of 400,000. So not only did that they help there to financial independence, but these women now also benefit from the increased empowerment within their communities, because most of the women then hired their husbands to involve in their activities. So this is a true transformational of their gender role as well. And then they unleashing the new opportunities through the financial inclusion. Through our project, Climate Vulnerable Women gained access to formal banking, since everyone has been now come under the digital financing as well as individual bank accounts. So they get the access to formal banking, and also the better control of the accountability of the finances, and also the entrepreneurship and business planning and investment that we are supporting with that increasing the capacity of the households level. And the second one that besides the the Climate Resilience Plan, another fund that we are working with that for the institutions to, this is called the performance-based climate resilience grants. And the model that we taken from the local, the global model of UNCDF, where actually we're supporting the international and domestic finance and through the intergovernmental fiscal transfer process, we call that performance-based climate resilient grants. The local institutions need to get, they get qualified for some sorts of key areas to get those to access those funds, and also then it support the local development budget, and also that help to improve their local level planning for targeting the adaptation, and also some capacity building of the local institutions so that they can harness the maximum benefits of the initiatives. And then they take the different adaptive community schemes in the various areas like nature-based solutions sometimes, and many other areas like resilient farming supported by the resilient irrigation. This is one of the examples. We have many good examples, and this is one of the examples where the, if you see that the lightning sheds providing the refuge. Bangladesh has one of the highest rates of death by the lightning globally. And this picture is taken in, this initiative was taken in How region, the Sylhet region, which is famous for our, for our food production, as well as very much vulnerable for flash flooding. So, and also the lightning is one of the key hazards there. So with this support, a very simple infrastructure, but that helping the farmers to get the shelter during the cultivation season, as well as during the monsoon and the flash flood season, when they're actually busy with fishing. So this is a very small, the very simple infrastructure, but it's very handy. And also this, this initiative was mentioned in the National Adaptation Plan as well. So together, there's two complementary climate models that I was mentioning. One is the Climate Resilience Plan and then the PBCRG, Performance-Based Climate Resilience Budgeting. There's two complementary climate finance models are contributing to resilient communities, institutions, and infrastructures in Bangladesh in a complementary way. So how the model is actually evolved. And if you see that the whole approach of the model, you will see that the women are the center of the climate action, and where we are engaging the youth for the intergenerational changes, and also the implementing the nature-based solutions through the PBCRG schemes, and accelerating the socio-economic development through green cooperatives. The Climate Resilience Plan helped farmers to take this small initiative. Now they are being engaged with the larger forum to expand their businesses, and therefore we form the climate cooperatives to support them. And also, if you see that if you place the women at the heart of the climate action, that they will be able to, overcome the high risk and the greater, because they are the one who take the huge burdens for the climate impact, and it's disproportionately impacting them, and also the social and financial security can be built on with the investing in the women, and also. Or they can be develop themselves as a decision making process as well in the local government level as well. They will be able to raise their voices in the local planning as well. And as I said, that engaging the youth for the intergenerational changes, youth. We are investing heavily on the youth as well in our project areas, where we are trying to. Trying to develop the youths who are also the beneficiaries. Their families are the beneficiaries of the project, and they're and engaging those youths so that they transform their lives, and they build the awareness among the communities, and they also have some skills so that they can be better prepared for the future shocks as well. So it's also the leveraging the demographic dividend that currently Bangladesh have. You see that implementing the nature-based solution. So it's another way that we are trying to integrate the nature-based solution in the local government efforts through the PVCRG schemes. This is the picture that we the upper one is actually they're planting the raising the mangroves in the riverside, which will help them to protect from the different types of disasters as well as in the land erosion. And the next part is they're harvesting the rainwater so that they can use in the lean period and the other time where the salinity nutrition is a big problem. So it's a very sustainable and cost-effective solution. Accelerating socio-economic development through green cooperatives. It's an initiative that we have now we are building on, and as I was mentioning that. We have supported more than 35,000 women beneficiaries, close to 35,000 women beneficiaries to start their livelihood activities, and they got some skills training and which helped them to form their groups and to try and see some of the livelihood activities. Now with that enhanced skills and training, we are now trying to link them with in different types of green business, and we are forming climate cooperatives, and then the climate cooperatives will be developed in a way so that they can harness the financing from the private institutions as well. Jasmine, can you go next? And besides the efforts that we are working with the communities and the local institutions, we are also busy with some of the policy agendas. That is a very timely initiative, and I think this is very important for ourselves. If you see that the picture of our, if you see the map, you will see the different colors of vulnerability. We have different types of vulnerability map, but this is the first one where we have actually been able to find out each union and also rank them in terms of their vulnerability, and which we call that climate vulnerability index, which will help essentially, differentiate the which unions among the local areas are most vulnerable, and that will help government to invest their own resources as well to support the communities who need most. So what are the lessons learned? That because the logic has been piloting in 7 districts of the country. The most of 5 are in the coastal areas, and 1 is in the river areas, and another one is how regions. So 7 districts. So what are the lessons learned that we got it from this model? Is awareness and the capacity on climate change needs to be increased at the levels throughout the country. This model has to be scaled up in the whole climate vulnerable landscapes, and also the legislative review of the existing policies. Let's say I was talking about the climate vulnerability index. If we take this index for allocating the revenue budgets or the adaptation budgets, that will harness the most funding for the most vulnerable areas, and also the mobilizing the local resources such as local taxes to increase and strengthen the sustainability of the local climate change budget can be explored over the time. Of course, not all the areas have the capacity to mobilizing the local resources, but there are some where actually local resources can be used for the building the local resilience. And another important lesson that we learned over time is the community and local government leadership promote through the citizens empowerment. If you engage the people for the annual planning and also the 5 years planning in the local level, they will give you the perfect picture that where investment is very important. And if you engage them afterwards to monitor those activities, that will sustain the development results as well. And also the accountability mechanisms need to be established. Like we have tried a few things like the social auditing. So this kind of system and need to be inbuilt also in the system as well to ensure that the mechanism, the climate finance is very transparent and institutions are held accountable for this. And the coordination among the different stakeholders in the sector is also very improved. We have many initiatives like the disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and also some of the mitigation efforts. So we need to have a strong coordination so that all the efforts can maximize the benefits and can complement one to another. If we think about the way forward, so there are lots more things to do, like the innovative climate financing, especially exploring the innovative climate like the risk financing, and also the green bonds, blended finance, which need to be explored further to scale up, and also the private sector's participation in the climate adaptation, and also the devolving the power to the local stakeholders, like the institutionalized mechanisms for locally led adaptation, where the local people will be able to design their own program rather than relying on the central government to allocate their budget and the allocating their schemes types and size. And also the increased local level climate finances. They develop a strong business case for channeling increased resources from the national and international level for the local level adaptation. And also they enhance the transparency and the accountability climate finance, as I mentioned, like involving the social auditing in terms of the climate finance expenditure in the local level could be one of the good examples of ensuring the transparency and the accountability. And also the climate vulnerability index that I was mentioning is one of the key policy agenda. Now we are look forward. They look forward to engage with the local government institutions to acknowledge this, because this will allow the revising the financing disbursement national fiscal financing for the vulnerability areas more than currently that we have. And also the addressing the loss and damage. If you invest and if you're engaged with the anticipated action, that will help you to reduce the loss and damage. And also if you mobilize the current sets of instruments like risk insurance and the transfer instrument, that will help you to retain the key assets and the key financial support whenever there is a huge climate events like the weather events. That's the last time we felt in these how regions that most of our efforts has been washed away just 2 to 3 days in flushing flood. So these are the risk initiatives needs to be strengthened in the system so that the communities and the vulnerable houses can retain their key vulnerable the assets. And also the vulnerable household has to be integrated into the social protection system so that they can at least covered under the national protection system. So in short, I was trying to give you the whole idea of the local government initiative on climate change and how it has been helping. The different types of financing model we're trying with the institutions and also with the vulnerable households, and build on those initiatives, how we are now trying to make them sustainable so that they can sustain in a longer term in terms of the households, reducing the households vulnerabilities, and also the institutions.
I think Azadur Rahman is whole.
Yes, I think, Azad, you're cutting off, so maybe we were lucky that we had you for so long and your internet connectivity worked. So thank you very much, Azad, for a very comprehensive presentation. We would like now to start with our panel discussion, and perhaps we will start with our Joint Secretary of the Local Government Division and National Project Director of Logic. It'd be great if you could all, also our panelists, turn on their video so we can see you all. That'd be wonderful. So yes, let us start with our National Project Director. Perhaps you could introduce yourself and then explain what role the government plays in facilitating locally led adaptation. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. This is Mohammad Fazle Azim, Joint Secretary and NPD, Logic UNDP. I think this is my first meeting, and I'm very happy to see you and very lucky. And I think I join with you and work together. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will be discussing the local government initiative on climate change, Logic project in Bangladesh. Climate change is one of the most pressing issue of our time, and it is essential that we take immediate action to mitigate its effects. The Logic process is an innovative initiative that seeks to empower the local government in Bangladesh to take charge of their response to climate change. The Logic project is a joint initiative between the government of Bangladesh, the European Union, government of Sweden, and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, United Nations Capital Development Fund. The project aims to develop mechanisms to deliver climate finance to the most vulnerable households and local government institutions across 7 climate vulnerable districts for building resilience and promoting local action on climate change adaptation at a scale. Sound is clear? Hello, Jasmine?
Yeah, sound is clear.
It is clear, thank you.
The role of government in implementing the Logic project is critical for several reasons. Firstly, the local government is funding and the projects and is responsible for its implementation. One of the key components of the Logic projects is capacity building. The project provides training and beneficiaries and local government officials on climate change adaptation, mitigation measures, as well as on the use of climate data and information that enable them to develop climate resilience plans and policies that are tailored to their local context. Secondly, another important aspect of the Logic projects is community engagement. The project works closely with the local communities to ensure that their needs and perspectives are taken into the account in the planning implementation of climate change measures. This helps to build trust and ensure that the measures are effective and sustainable. Here is where the local government comes to play, as it is best placed to understand the unique challenges and opportunities facing their communities in the context climate change. They have local knowledge and expertise that they can be leveraged to develop effective climate change adaptation and mitigation measures that are tailored to the local context. Lastly, Logic third main objective, policy advocacy and the local government is a key factor in the implementation of national climate policies and strategies. This is responsible to translating national policies into local action, which is essential to achieving the target set out the national climate plans. The next course of the action will be mainstreaming and institutionalizing the logic climate financing model and further promote local action and climate change adaptation at a scale. Through advocacy and mainstreaming the good practices, logic aims to ensure scalability and sustainability that is attaining the sustainable development goals by 2023. In conclusion, the role of local government in implementing the local government initiative on climate change logic project in Bangladesh is crucial for building climate resilience at the local level. Local government have a unique role to play, delivering essential services, understanding local challenges and opportunities, engaging communities, and translating national policies into local action. By empowering local government, the logic process is helping to build more climate resilient Bangladesh and is a model for other countries as to follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your inputs. I would like to now hand over to Nayoka Martinez-Beckström, who's the first secretary at the Environment and Climate Change at the Embassy of Sweden to Bangladesh. And I would like to first ask, why is it important to Sweden to support initiatives that invest in adaptation at the local level? So why is it important that climate finance reaches local governments and communities?
1 minute, Jasmine, Mr. Jasmine.
Please.
I want to join another meeting in Cabinet Division. If you allow me, I can leave. My deputy, Shamsul Haq, already attended there.
Sure. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank
We're
you.
glad you were able to make it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Nayoka, sorry.
Hi.
Hand over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
very well.
Do you hear me? Okay, great. I'm really pleased to be part of this. So thank you for the invitation, and also because the last couple of days we have been visiting logic sites in 3 of the southern districts, and so when I speak about logic, I see faces. I see people that are actually engaged in the different processes of this program. Now, the Swedish development cooperation policy is intended to create conditions so that people living in poverty and oppression can improve their own lives, right? And so the Logic program presents this kind of opportunity where we actually address systemic problems in terms of resources reaching the local level, and also provide skills and opportunities to make local actors make the change for themselves. When we say local actors here, it's very important to know that we are focusing on not just local government institutions here, but we are also focusing on communities, so the households and the civil society groups and organizations that communities form. And while we speak of, we can speak in very general terms about climate change and how this affects Bangladesh as a whole, a lot of the action has to be done locally. And what Logic has actually produced is when I refer to this map provided by Assad, when you see the climate vulnerabilities geographic distribution of vulnerabilities. If you put that against the income and poverty distribution in Bangladesh, you will see almost a clear mirroring of this. So it somehow provides a lot of argument on why we have to work on the ground when we work with adaptation, and we have to work with a program that is actually creating these systemic changes, right? Assad has referred to the fact that people in these climate vulnerable areas, they lack opportunities. They are constantly bombarded by the adverse effects of climate-induced disasters. Many of them are isolated, and cannot access basic services. So I remember having to travel like hours just to reach a number of villages. So can you imagine living in those conditions where, you have to somehow be self-sustaining, but then you have all these problems about the salinization and the fact that you cannot even cultivate your land. So, and you don't have any other sources of livelihoods other than what you have to produce from the land. So, which you don't even own, which you have to lease from someone. So, I mean, these are the complexities of the vulnerabilities that the target groups of Logic are facing. And this is the reason why a program like Logic has to be really as local as possible. And then on the basis of that, you produce, enough evidence to show the government how, if you allocate resources the right way, if you can change the decision-making structure on resources and channel them more for adaptation and not just disaster response, then you can actually make a difference in the lives of local communities. So this is the reason why we have chosen to be part of the Logic program.
Thank you very much. And I think it's very important that you highlighted the kind of interconnectedness between development and adaptation. I think that is a very important thing to highlight. And if I can just ask one follow-up question, because we've had this discussion on the sidelines, and I know that the government of Sweden is very supportive of innovative kind of approaches to climate finance and adaptation. And we've, talked about kind of innovative mechanisms. So what kind of approaches do you envision, and how can we bring innovation to this landscape of adaptation?
Yeah, so I mean, innovation is already happening for these people thanks to additional knowledge and skills that the project like Logic provides. Because before Logic came, people have been trying to adapt using traditional ways, and now what Logic is teaching is like giving them other options, based on, let's say, scientific use of land and use of limited water resources and all. So there's so many adaptive practices that are coming out that are non-traditional and that are putting people into a different role, becoming more organized, for example, forming savings groups, especially among the women, experimenting on different livelihood schemes, and then actually investing further into additional livelihoods and even, creating more jobs and economic opportunities. And so one of the things that Logic has produced, and which we have now seen this savings groups forming into formalized cooperatives that are, how do you say this, climate cooperatives.
Climate smart cooperatives.
Yeah. Climate smart cooperatives. Yeah, and Sweden has a number of instruments that we would like to consider going forward, in implementing through the program. And one of them is a guarantee instrument, which our partner UNCDF is very used to applying in other contexts. So it would be great to see the application of a guarantee instrument so that you can pool all these women's cooperatives together, and then you can take the guarantee instrument can take on the risk, a large part of the risk for these women when they access formal financing channels. They get more credits from the bank, for example, so the guarantee can come in and reduce the risk for the banks to lend to these women. So more productive activities can come out of these types of arrangements.
Great, thank you very much, Nayoka. That was very insightful. And perhaps I will ask Sophie right now, because Nayoka has just mentioned something about UNCDF and your guarantee scheme. So I'd like to introduce Sophie de Koning, the global manager of the Local Climate Adaptive Living Facility, also very commonly known as LOCAL from UNCDF. So perhaps you can give us a bit of an idea of how the LOCAL model operates, and perhaps allude to innovative climate finance mechanisms such as guarantees that Nayoka just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Thank you everyone also for the opportunity to be here with you all today. Perhaps I'll start with indeed the instruments that are already in the logic or in the LOCAL, and see how, I mean, we pointed, or colleagues pointed to the fact, it is really important that adaptation is localized, but the challenge is how to do this at scale, how to do this in a systemic manner, so that it's of course the 72 union parishes that are already benefiting, but actually more and more, because there are over 4,000 in a country like Bangladesh, and many more across the world. So the way we've been working with countries on this for the last 12 years has been to leverage, in fact, country systems and their intergovernmental fiscal transfer systems to channel climate finance to the local government authorities, and from there incentivize through a performance-based grant, a performance-based climate resilience grant, the fact that that finance would be used really closely with communities. So the reason for doing that is that it allows for the model to be systemic, really using country systems, but also to be scalable. And we see that other countries have even reached more local government than what we have, the country has managed in Bangladesh, perhaps because they also started a bit earlier. Now, these performance-based grants actually enable to ensure the programming and verification of the climate expenditure at the local level. It is important because although we hear the continuum between development and adaptation and disaster risk reduction, when it comes to also helping countries to access climate finance for the benefit of communities, this climate additionality is essential. So I'll come to that in a moment. So the fact that it's channeled through those systems make it really a model that can be sustained and then work together with other grant transfers that local government might get. The grants, without going into the technicalities, include minimum conditions. Assad pointed to that a bit, but local governments have to meet certain conditions to access the grants. It is important to ensure the fiduciary risk management, but also the good use. And in those conditions, you can also look into how to ensure this strong co-decision or involvement of communities or certain groups. And importantly, they also are incentivized with performance measures, meaning that the local governments will be scored against certain dimensions, and in particular, how they use the rest of their climate finance, the rest of their development finance for climate change purposes. So it's not innovative as in blended finance, and I'll come to that, but I think it's quite innovative because it means that with this additional climate finance, this specific dedicated climate grants, it is also possible to influence how the regular development of a country, the regular domestic resources become gradually climate compatible. And eventually the countries can also track that finance and report as part of their communications to UNFCCC. So the pool of climate finance become bigger than what might be supported through ODA, climate funds, or MDBs. Now, if I can just say a word on that, a big problem here is, of course, getting that finance to the right level, but it's also to increase the source of finance. And just to remind us why we're doing this, those local communities don't access much climate finance, but it's just mirror the fact that you mentioned 10%, Jasmine, I think, but it's also mirror the fact that, you know, they are also located in some of the most vulnerable countries and often LDCs or small island states. And if we look at the last report of the Standing Committee on Finance, actually LDCs roughly get 25% of the climate finance. But what's interesting is that if you look per capita, they get roughly half what non-LDCs might get. So there as well, hopefully a model like Logic can also show, and through the demonstration effect, show that actually once the funding reaches the population, it can be effectively used, it is effectively used, and therefore make a case so that LDCs get a bigger share of climate finance per capita and a bigger share of climate finance. Now, on the other instrument, I mean, what is really interesting with the Logic is that there is a mix of instrument already now between the Climate Resilience Fund for communities, and we've seen how they evolved from, you know, households to cooperatives and women cooperatives, and then the performance-based grants. And indeed, it's for the next phase or the continuation, but we actually actively working with the government of Sweden and all the partners that are here today to look at how a guarantee structure could help somehow de-risk what the cooperative might access in terms of climate finance. So there are good experience indeed, like Nayoka was mentioning, not necessarily apply to climate change issues, but with women's group and other vulnerable groups. And so we are confident that we can bring that instrument as a kind of, you know, next generation for the continuation and evolving from perhaps or complementing the original climate resilience funds. Now, if we were looking at some point and also going to other local governments, cities, urban one, perhaps there is also an interest to look at guarantees for larger scale infrastructure, because Logic is now working at the Union. But before that, there was also pilot work at the Basila. And so once you come to a higher level of local governments, the size of the investment, if it's an urban setting, maybe the type of investment or infrastructure might also call for some models of, you know, blending. So I think there is lots of room for new instruments and bringing innovation there, but also actually, you know, getting things right in terms of volumes of finance and per capita climate finance, which in a way solving that would be a huge innovation because it's not there yet. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I think there's a very good point. I think the PBCRG model coupled with the CRF model that we've established in the Logic project is a very innovative but also sustainable model. And we do hope that through demonstration effect, like you've mentioned, we can access more finance. So thank you very much. And now I'd like to hand over to Hubert Blanc, Attaché and Program Manager for Green Inclusive Development at the Delegation of the European Union to Bangladesh. Hi, Hubert. So the European Union, alongside the government of Sweden, was one of the early kind of believers in the idea of locally led adaptation. So I'd just like to know from you, how does the Logic project align with the EU's ideals for effective adaptation? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Yasmin. I hope you can all hear me. So yes, we already gone into detail on what Logic effectively entails with a couple of suggestions for innovative approaches. Just to take a step back to why the European Union is supporting Logic. Our overall strategy is based on our 2021 strategy on climate adaptation, which came 5 years after Logic came into existence. The objectives fit nicely within our strategy. The strategy itself is based on our 2023 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the European Green Deal. Some of you might have heard about it. And our strategy has 4 objectives, basically. First one is smarter adaptation to improve the knowledge and managing uncertainty, basically supporting innovation. The second one is more systematic adaptation to support policy development at all levels and sectors within countries and regions. Third objective, faster adaptation, speeding up adaptation across the board. And then finally, stepping up international action for climate resilience. Well, to start with the fourth objective, our support to this action is witness of our commitment to international action and our enduring commitment. We've been in here for quite some time already. Then on the other elements, like innovation, it has been mentioned by Sophie and Nayoka already, is an integrated element of this action. It provides for local solutions adapted off-the-shelf products, which can help local communities in adapting to climate change. Climate change funding, it's already mentioned. This operation at its current stage is basically grant operated, but in the future, it might develop into like more complicated, more complex financing structures, as mentioned by Sophie already. Then thirdly, the systematic approach. Our objective is more systematic adaptation in general. And that is something you see nicely within the logic approach. It allows for local solutions, but integrated into government structures. It's based on sound policies within local government structures and completely supported by government. So it delivers locally, it works through central government and operates, and that is one other feature which we particularly appreciate in that. It has this two-pronged approach, where on the one hand you work through local authorities, funding local authorities, and on the other hand, target vulnerable population groups. Then the last element, faster adaptation. We all want faster adaptation, obviously. But the big advantage of logic is that through providing local solutions, through operating at local level, it has a built-in flexibility, adaptability. By listening to local population groups, to listening to local authorities, you are in direct contact with the problems, the challenges that exist there, which allows you to fund exactly, pinpoint and focus exactly on the action where it is most needed. So as you see, across the board logic fits really nicely in our overall objectives for climate change adaptation. Just to mention just another element there, it was already touched upon by both Nayoka and Sophie. The private sector element there, yes, it does target local authorities. It works with local population, vulnerable groups there. But it has this option, this facility where the action itself can gradually step up cooperation with private sector, create better business linkages. The options are there. The facility is there, the structure is there, and it's something that really can be developed further in the future. I stopped there. Basically, I explained why we are in logic. We are currently contemplating further cooperation, but that is something for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. And indeed, we look forward to upscaling this model and, like you said, innovating it by cooperating with the private sector and creating kind of more innovative financing models. So I would like to conclude the panel discussion here, unless one of our panelists would like to add something. Is there anyone? I think in the interest of time, I would like to allocate a little bit time to our audience today. We have already had some questions in the chat box, but I would also like to request other colleagues, after hearing this very rich debate, whether someone else might have a question. So I will start with the question we have in the chat box, and in the meantime, the audience perhaps can think of some other questions. But there was a remark that a draft of the climate vulnerability assessment at the national level was prepared previously by the Ministry of Environment and GIZ. And I think I would like to hand this question to Azad, kind of explain the difference between this climate vulnerability assessment and our climate vulnerability index that we've produced.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jasmine, and also it's a nice question. Yes, I mean, the vulnerability that was designed by the GIZ earlier, I mean, the national climate vulnerability mapping, they're actually allowed to the 6 hotspots of the country, and that allowed to generalize some of the key vulnerabilities inside the hotspots. But from the climate vulnerability index that we have developed through this initiative, actually has further downscaled up to the union levels. So we have used the local data, I mean the national data set, so that we can, I mean if you see that the reflection from the NIOCA, that the poverty dimension and also the climate change impact vulnerability dimension has a very close relationship. So that's mean that if you want to compare that both scenarios, and if you use the national data set, that then it actually helped us to identify the key difference between among the areas, not even the upazilas, but also in the union level as well. So these kinds of going so downscale difference has not been materialized by the other documents. So that's why it actually involved. Let's say if it's not about the let me go with another way even. I mean, if you see that the climate change is evolving things, and climate change is a new dimension, that allows us, also tells us that we should do the things differently than we have done earlier. So that's why, I mean, if you moving on those transformational changes, that will help the national government to things differently. Let's say now the budget has been local budgeting through the allocation of the financing from the national budget to the local are allocated on the basis of the 3 criteria. Let's say population and the size of the area and the remoteness. But what about the climate vulnerability? So this CBI actually will help government to identify to take into consideration the climate vulnerability as well. That will actually help it's also the area of the climate justice. Then the most vulnerable people will get the maximum allocation rather than their size of the population, and also that will also reduce the migration and many other social problem now that we are facing through this process. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Azad. So now, if anyone from our attendees has a question, it doesn't have to be a question. It can also be a remark or a comment on what has been discussed and presented today. We would be we would welcome those remarks as well. So if you just raise your hand or paste your question in the Q&A section or chat box. And if not, we will conclude the session. If anyone would like to say anything, now's your chance. So I think no one is raising their hand. So perhaps if there's any other questions that you do have from the audience, you're very welcome to send me an email as well, and I can connect you with the right people. Right. Okay. And thank you so much, NIOCA, Sophie, Hubert, Azad, for this very informative session. It's great to hear your perspectives and insights on how locally led adaptation and financing can really accelerate sustainable development and climate change efforts in Bangladesh and beyond. So I thank you all for taking the time today to present and give us your inputs. Thank you so much.